I want to welcome everybody to the Sustainable Practices for Wisconsin Printers, Reducing Operating Costs with Environmental Management Systems. Programs brought to you by Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, their Green Tier program. We have SGP, FTA, GLGA, SGIA, and TLMI. Your moderator is Joe Lyman. I'm president of the Great Lakes Graphics Association. Today's agendas: welcome and introductions, anatomy of an EMS program, sustainable green partnership, printing partnership program. We'll talk about Green Tier. We'll talk about case studies with Lauterbach Group, and then we'll have question and answers at the end of the webinar. Today's speakers are Wendy Naden, Principal, Naden Consulting. Wendy is a trained chemist and has worked over 20 years in the industry as an environmental health and safety consultant, having worked for major multinational printers in the preceding 6 years. We have Doreen Monteleone. She's a principal at D2 Advisory Group and the Flexographic Technical Association. Doreen has been affiliated with FTA in various capacities for 23 years. She has been with SGP since its inception and represents FTA on the SGP Board of Directors, including serving as its current treasurer. Erica Klutmeyer, she's a sustainability advisor for Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. Erica recently returned to the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources to work as a sustainability advisor for DNR's Green Tier program. She connects businesses and local communities to ideas, strategies, and resources to not only reduce their environmental footprint, but also reshape the way they work in order to create more efficient, equitable, and profitable organizations. And then we have Dolores Corcoran, who is a productivity systems manager at Lauterbach Group. Dolores has worked for Lauterbach Group, located in Sussex, Wisconsin, for the past 8 years as their productivity systems manager, responsible for managing, implementing, and improving business structures and creating sustainable business transparency. Her background is implementation of quality management, environmental sustainability, and leads strategic process improvement systems. During her time off, Dolores embraces nature and outdoor activities. Welcome, presenters. I believe we have Wendy first, who is going to be providing you a background in environmental management systems.
Thank you, Joe. Welcome everybody to the webinar this morning. I'm going to chat briefly to explain the structure and functions of an environment management system. So the first question a lot of newbies have when they're thinking about implementing some kind of management system is exactly what is an environment management system? What are we getting ourselves into? And I think this is one of the biggest concepts, the hardest concepts that people have getting their head around, and a lot of facilities do struggle with this aspect. So an environmental management system it's a management approach that embeds environmental considerations into operating practices of your business. So it is incorporated in your daily activities as opposed to something that is a bolt-on type of activity that you kind of think of once you've got everything done. All management systems, regardless of whether it's focused on the environment, whether it's focused on quality, or whether it's focused on sustainability, uses the plan, do, check, act model. So the management system continuously moves around in a circle with all of these 4 different components of the management system. So the goal of a management system is that you continuously improve your performance. And I know sometimes that's a bit of a cliche and it's been overused, continuous improvement. But that is the goal of the plan, do, check, act model. So almost all management systems complete that cycle on an annual basis. So it means that this isn't a one-off activity that you put this management system in place and then you're done. You put it in place and then you constantly, every year, you keep reviewing and going around and looking at your activities to find ways to improve what you do. And obviously, the cornerstone of that is that you're learning as you do this. So when you start, you're not going absolutely perfect at what you do, and that's the goal, is that each time you go around, you improve your knowledge and your learning, and with that comes a continuous improvement. So if we can move to the next slide, please, Joe. So as I mentioned, there are different management systems and differences between them, not in terms of their structure, but in terms of what they look at and the scope of the management system. So what is the difference between an environmental management system and a sustainability management system? Well, there is a lot of overlap between these two management systems, but there are notable differences. So an environmental management system is principally focused on activities within the footprint of the facility. So what happens within the four walls or within the boundaries of your property. And examples of environmental management systems are ISO 14000, for example. Wisconsin has the Green Tier program, which is very closely aligned with ISO 14000. Those are environmental management systems. And from the graphic on the right, you can see where the environmental management system kind of sits in the grand scheme of things. A sustainability management system includes all the elements of an environmental management system, but it expands the scope. So it expands it throughout the supply chain, and it includes safety and health of employees, and it also incorporates the interest of the community. So you can see that there are really those three elements to a sustainability management system. There's the environmental part of it, there's the social part of it, and there is also an economic part of it. And sometimes that's called the three pillars, the people, planet, and profit part of it. And the profit part of it, or the economic part of it, really comes down to a business can't be sustainable if it doesn't generate a profit. You can have a sustainability management system for a non-profit organization, but there's still an economic aspect to that. They can't be losing money because no entity can continue if they're losing money. An example of a sustainability management system is the Sustainable Green Printing Partnership, or SGP. Can we take the next slide, please, Joe? So where do you start? If you're on board with the concept and the idea and you'd like to build up this management system, what is the starting point and where do you go from there? So your very first question is going to be, well, which model are we going to follow? Are we going to go for an ISO certification, which is a third-party certification? Are we going to go with Green Tier, which is a localized sustainability environmental model that's certified, but which is customized to the printing industry? Do you want to expand it from environment into sustainability? That's your very first choice. And that's an individual choice on what your goals are and what you want to achieve. Once you've decided which model you're going to follow, I would suggest the next step is to find the resources that are going to help you determine how you're going to move through the process. And whichever certification scheme you decide to follow, there are a lot of resources out there. So SGP on the website has a lot of templates and written guidelines, a roadmap to it. Green Tier has a lot of resources, and Erica is on the webinar today to assist facilities with their certification scheme. ISO, of course, has a lot of written guidance to help you if that's the path you choose. So figure out what resources are available. And then the next stage, I would suggest, find a person or a team who are going to champion your EMS. because it is important that you have somebody drive it through the organization. Now, that doesn't mean they have to be responsible for it, but you do need somebody that's going to navigate through the implementation process. Everybody within your organization needs to know what it is that you're trying to achieve. So communication is a key part in the development and during the implementation of your management. So let them know what your goals are, what you're trying to achieve, and how they can participate. There are responsibilities required. So within the management group, individuals will need to know what they're responsible for, and everybody within the organization will need to know how the management system will apply to them. Continuous improvement is a keystone of any management system. So the first stage really is to work on something that's manageable and get an early success story. So look for the low-hanging fruit as your first objectives. That will get people on board, it will get people motivated, and it will help you to start working through that continuous improvement cycle. And I caution a lot of facilities who are a bit nervous or are struggling a little bit that you don't have to be perfect when you get started on your management system. If you were, then really what's the point of your management system? The whole concept is about continuous improvement and getting better with time and learning about your activities and how it impacts on the environment. And really key to that whole continuous improvement and to get people to buy into your management system is to integrate the management system into existing daily activities. Because if you try and create separate activities just for your EMS, people are going to get tired of that pretty quickly. That's just creating work. And people aren't going to be too keen on having a burden of responsibilities that aren't related to their existing job activities. Next slide, please, Joe. So what does that really mean? So I would suggest that you look at ways that you already communicate with your internal and external stakeholders, so your employees, your contractors, and your vendors. So you can leverage those kinds of activities. So if you have regular company meetings, and some do, they'll have an annual barbecue, they'll have a Christmas lunch, things of that nature. If you have regular department meetings or even very short daily or weekly toolbox meetings that might only last 5 or 10 minutes, leverage those to tag on your message about your management system. And little bites of information are much better in the long term. People retain them better than if you have a very large chunk of information which isn't very digestible. Any health or safety training that you have, you can tag on EMS training to that. Use your notice boards, use your physical space to get that information out there, get your employees involved. The success of the program is going to be contingent on everybody in the organization to the management system. And those folks on the floor, they really know how things work, so get them involved. Use your website and social media to get your message out to your external stakeholders. That is really the way that we reach out to people now, so utilize those for your management system. And those low-hanging fruit that I mentioned, typically facilities look at solid waste, energy reduction, and water reductions. Those are typically easy first wins if you're looking for something for your first annual project. Okay, next slide, please, Joe. So planning. So I mentioned in the very first slide that a management system is about the plan, do, check, act model. And you can kind of see that circle in the graphic embedded within this slide. So the first stage is to plan what you want to do. You've got to start somewhere, and you need to figure out what your management system is going to look like, what it's going to consist of, and what are the activities that you are going to complete as part of your management system. So the planning step, the very first stage really should be to develop a written environmental policy that describes your intent and commitment to the environment. There are some standard boilerplate ones out there. You won't have any difficulty in finding one if you do a web search, but you can customize that as much as you like. But it should be a simple one-pager that tells internal and external stakeholders what your plans are. You need to figure out what the environmental aspects of your organization are and which ones are significant. This is kind of ISO 14000 language. Basically, look at which media that you interact with. Is it air emissions? Is it usage of natural resources, energy usage? Which of those does your particular facility interact with, and which ones are the biggest, which ones are the major or most significant environmental aspect, because those are the ones that you are going to want to focus on to try and improve your performance in those areas. You also need to figure out what are your regulatory requirements and responsibilities. So you need to identify what applies to the activities that you conduct, and make sure that you comply with those. And sometimes for some facilities, this is a bit of a tricky one. Sometimes you're going to need third-party help with this, or you can use your industry associations or another very valuable resource. But somehow or other, you're going to have to come up with a list of what the regulatory requirements are, because you need to comply with those. How are you going to know if you're improving your performance? Well, you have to figure out some kind of measurement of where you are now, and that's your baseline metrics. So how much do you emit to the air? How much water do you use? How much electricity do you use? Collect all those baseline measures, and that's a measure of what your starting point is. And then finally in planning, now you've got to figure out, now you know where you're at now, which one of those or which ones of those are you going to improve in the next management system cycle. Okay, next slide, please. So you've planned what you're going to do. Now you've actually got to do it. So you need to implement control measures for your significant aspects. Again, this is ISO 14001 language, but you've got to figure out some kind of continuous improvement project or some kind of procedures to monitor and control your environmental performance. So one of the ways you do this is by developing and implementing written procedures. And depending, again, on the activities and how much you want to get into paperwork, it will vary the degree of written procedures that you need. But you're going to need a basic number of written procedures to make sure that everybody is on the same page with certain activities. And finally, you're going to implement the action plan that you've developed to meet your performance objective, which might be, for example, in the first year, that you want to reduce your electricity usage by 10% arbitrarily. You need an action plan to figure out how you're going to meet that performance objective. Okay, next slide, please. Jill? So coming round in the cycle, it's going to take you a while to implement. That might take you the bulk of the year to implement your procedures and your action plan to reduce your energy usage. At some point, you're going to start checking. You're going to want to figure out these activities that we've implemented, what kind of impact are they having? So you already knew what your performance was at the beginning of the cycle because you collected your baseline metrics. You knew what your energy usage was in the previous year. So at the end of the year, you're going to collect your metrics for your key performance indicators. So what was your electricity usage in this year after you've implemented the action plan to try and reduce it? Did you meet your objectives? Were you successful? Did you meet that 10% reduction, or did you exceed it? Or did you fall short for some reason? And determine what your performance was. In addition to your performance objectives, you also need to figure out what your performance was relative to regulatory compliance. So periodically, you're going to need to check to make sure that you're meeting all of the requirements in those regulations. Have you dotted the I's and crossed the T's? Have you got all your waste manifests in place? Have you labeled everything as you're required to? Have you filed all the reports with regulatory agencies that you're required to? You need to do that periodically. doesn't necessarily need to be on an annual basis. It depends on the management system that you're working with, but you need to do that systematically on a regular basis. The management system that you put in place, that needs to be checked annually to make sure that all the different elements that you've planned for, that you've followed, you actually have done that, and that it's delivered the results. And the goal of an audit isn't to find fault or assign blame. It's to look for the things that you're good at. What are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? Where can you improve? That is the goal of that audit of the management system. Where can we improve on our activities for the year? And once you've done all that checking, then upper management will take a look at the results of all those activities and figure out how well did we do. Did we have enough resources that we put into this management system? Do we need to look at another way? Is there some other way that we can improve the following cycle of the management system? Next slide, please, Jill. And then you need to act on that checking. So if you found any regulatory non-compliances, those need to be addressed and dealt with right away to make sure, A, that they are corrected, but secondly, that they don't reoccur. Why did we fall short? Why weren't all our containers labeled as they should have been? What should we do better to make sure it doesn't happen again? And likewise for the management system. The action plan you had for your annual project, if it wasn't successful, why wasn't it successful? What could we do better next time to make sure that we met our goals? And those written procedures that we developed as part of the management system, was everybody following them? If they weren't following them, then why weren't they? Do we need to improve our training? Do we need to change the procedures? What do we need to do to improve what we were doing this year to make it better for next year? Next slide, please, Joe. So the management system has a third, most of them have, not most of them, a lot of them have third-party audits. So if you want to be certified to a particular standard, to be an objective test of, are you meeting the certification criteria? So this is a third party that comes in, that looks at your activities, and their goal is to find evidence that you're meeting the criteria. The auditor isn't here to criticize you, as I mentioned, or to find fault. They're here to support your program and to add value to what you're doing. So when they come in and they ask you questions, they're looking for evidence. There aren't any trick questions. They're trying to understand your management system. They're trying to understand your activities so that they can assist you in moving forward in that next cycle of plan, do, check, act. And the third-party audit is all part of that continuous improvement. So sometimes if the auditor finds non-compliances, that is to help you. That is not to say, hey, you've done a lousy job. That's, hey, you know, you've got this program in place. Here are some ways that you can move forward next year to improve what you've done this year. So as an auditor myself, I always try to emphasize, people are nervous about third-party audits, but I always try to emphasize that is not the goal. The goal is really to be a part of your team and to help you moving forward. So thank you, Joe. That's, I think, my last slide, so I'll hand it over.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Wendy. At this time, I'd like to introduce or welcome Erica Klutmeyer from...
no, Doreen's next.
Doreen from FTA and SGP.
Sorry about that. I apologize for everyone that I have laryngitis this morning. I don't normally sound like this. And thanks, Wendy, for the introduction to the EMS process. This flows nicely into the Sustainable Green Printing Partnership Organization, which is an independent nonprofit that certifies printing facilities of all types in the United States and Canada, and all sizes in the United States and Canada. Now, SGP's approach is a true sustainability management system. It's not just an environmental management system. And as Wendy mentioned, it also incorporates the health, safety, labor, community aspects of it. And again, like she said, it does require that it has a true people, planet, and profit approach. And the profit part often just falls into place because a lot of what we're doing to be more sustainable is just simply good business practices, and the profit just falls in place after that. So SGP certifies the business practices of a printing operation, not the printed product itself. And like Wendy had mentioned, we do have a third-party audit system, and we do have a cross-recognition with Green Tier. So there is just minimal things that you need to do if you would like to be certified as well by Green Tier if you become SGP certified. And it is at this point supported by all the major printing organizations in North America, and there's a whole list of acronyms there and just about all of them are also sponsors of this event. So it is the only print certification program in North America created by the printing industry for the printing industry's benefit, supported by all the major organizations. Joe, could you go to the next slide, please? So like I said, it's a sustainability management system, and as opposed to an EMS, which may require an environmental policy and an environmental committee, it requires a sustainability policy and a sustainability committee. And it also requires that we have implementation aspects where you're compliance with all your regulations, your relevant regulations to where you're located. And again, it goes beyond your environmental regulations. It goes into your labor regulations and your health and safety regulations. It requires a continuous improvement project, which, as Wendy mentioned, comes out of that Plan, Do, Check, Act Dunning cycle, where each year you look at what your operations are doing and you gather together your committee and determine what makes sense for you and where you can improve every year. It requires communications with stakeholders. So those can be your internal staff as well as external. It could be your community. It could also be your customers. It could be your suppliers as well. It requires training of your employees, and not only training in the traditional way that you may think of, but also training if you need to in Spanish, if you have Spanish-speaking employees. So you need to ensure that all your employees are operating in the safest conditions. The checking and corrective action part of it, which is part of that Plan, Do, Check, Act, includes requires that you do an environmental compliance audit, a safety and health audit, and a sustainability management system audit. Those are all done internally. It requires the SMS, a senior management review, and some of this Wendy already mentioned. But again, we're taking it the broader sense in a sustainability program, not just an environmental. There's some document control, which requires writing procedures for various things. An annual report is included in the SMS for SGP. And then we require best practices. There are specific things that SGP requires depending upon your print process. Plus, you need to also monitor your metrics. And as Wendy mentioned, metrics could be anything from water use, your energy use. It could be even your illness and injury reporting. Because again, it's sustainability, not just environmental. And that leads us to the SGP Impact Tracker, which is an online cloud-based system that was created about a year ago at this point, and all SGP facilities are required to use it. You're given immediate access to it when you do apply to SGP. And it makes this process of developing an SMS much easier because it is an online dashboard. And although you still need a champion for any kind of a management system, having an online dashboard gives you the opportunity to give other members of your staff access to that dashboard so they can contribute to it and help keep it up to date and ensure that all elements are included. So you do upload all the elements of an EMS or an SMS and all the metrics to the Impact Tracker. And what this allows you to do is to track your progress. And in a minute, I'll show you some visuals of this. So it makes it easier to communicate your results internally and externally to your stakeholders, your customers. So it provides that added benefit of that visualization of what you're actually doing so that you can set continuous goals and objectives and brag about what you've done. And we also are developing it in a way that you can compare it to an aggregate in the SGP program. Now, granted, if you're a Flexo printer and then other SGP printers are offset or they're screen printers or digital printers, you might be say, oh, well, I can't compare apples to oranges. But certainly if the SGP community as a whole is, say, doing better in their water use and you're not, you may take another look at your system and say, hey, how come everybody else is doing that and I'm not? And maybe I should gather together my staff and see what we can do. Joe, next slide, please. So this is a very basic visual of the SGP Impact Tracker. If you go to the SGP website, and you know, it's sgppartnership.org, under the Resources tab, we have some links to webinars on the tracker to give you a little bit more information. But this is kind of the information that you would be adding in, and then you can visualize. So you can see from month to month what your, in this case, energy or electricity use is. From year to year, you can normalize it based on your production. So it may be, in this case, it was million square inches. It might be something like ink use. It could be length of substrate. And then you can refine it to the ranges. So you can actually visualize how your plan, do, check, act may be working when you're setting your goals and objectives every year. Are you improving? And if not, you can see that on this, and you may need to take another look at what you're doing. Joe, next slide, please. And then it also then can convert it into information that you might want to present to the community so they can better understand what it all means. Personally, I have solar panels on my house, and my solar panel app shows me things like this, because then I could say, oh, because we have solar, we avoid carbon pollution because of the power plant equivalent to so many trees. So this does something similar to that. And it does this for various aspects, not only your energy use, but your water use, your waste that you're recycling, and in this case, as much energy as so many homes might use. So this is a great tool to be able to use, again, internally to your staff to say, hey, look at what we're doing. Externally to the community, you could post it on your website if you wanted to, and to your customers to say, this is something that we're doing, and include it in your request for when you're responding to a request for proposal to show that you are a more sustainable printing operation. Next slide, Joe. I think that might be the last one. Oh, one more. Okay, so here's some information about some of the benefits that SGP certified facilities have been seeing because they have gotten certified. You can demonstrate your sustainability performance by having it validated by a third party. SGP has a team of auditors. In fact, Wendy is the lead auditor and does audit quite a few of them, but we have other auditors. They're all very well versed in printing, and they've been with the SGP for a number of years. So you can have that competitive edge, because you know many companies go out there and they say we're sustainable because we use recyclable substrate. But what else? What about there's so many more aspects to being a sustainable operation than just the ink or the substrate. And SGP, it takes that holistic approach and validates that. And we've surveyed the SGP printers in the past, and some of the impacts that they have seen and results because of the SGP certification and that drive to continuous improvement that's required within SGP. They've seen some significant reductions in hazardous waste, energy consumption, and waste going to the landfill. And again, you're eligible to be easily recognized under the Wisconsin Green Tier program should you become SGP certified. And again, on our SGP website, sgppartnership.org, under that resources tab, we have some information about that if you're interested in becoming dual certified. Next slide, Joe. There we go. Now we can move on to Green Tier.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Doreen. Erica?
Thanks, Joe, and good morning, everyone. I'm going to give you a quick crash course on Green Tier this morning, as well as some information about how environmental management systems work in Green Tier. So what is Green Tier? It is a voluntary program within the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources for businesses who are committed to reducing their environmental impacts while providing transparency to stakeholders at the same time. Our participants are going above and beyond minimum requirements by using their environmental management system to create efficiencies and drive continuous improvement. We like to recognize and celebrate our participants' successes every day, and we see them achieving far more than what our permits and regulations can require. As you can see from the map, we have a lot of participants from all around the state, and the program is open to businesses of all sizes and industries. We have an application process to determine eligibility. And right now we have about 69 Green Tier participants and about 205 facilities across the state. We do offer 3 participation options. Tier 1 is the first option and the most typical entry point into Green Tier. Then we have Tier 2, which is for companies who have a proven environmental management system already in place. And Tier 2 offers the most options for regulatory flexibility, and I'll talk about that in just a little bit. The last option is Green Tier charters, and charters are groups that form around a shared mission or interest area, and the members work together to really define their goals, their agreements and commitments for their members and strategies on how to get there. And in fact, Doreen mentioned, and I think Joe too, all the groups that are sponsoring this webinar today are part of a Green Tier charter for the printing industry. So what are the requirements of Green Tier participation? The main participation requirements are for Tier 1 and Tier 2. Those participants are required to have an environmental management system and to have outside audits at regular intervals and to submit annual reports. Now, the participation requirements for Tier 1 and Tier 2 are slightly different. For charters, as I mentioned earlier, they really define their own requirements. Some do require an EMS, but not all. But the similar thread is that all of our participants, whether it's Tier 1, Tier 2, or charters, are required to submit annual reports. And lastly, I just wanted to mention that we really do value our industry partnerships. And so we do recognize our certifications like Sustainable Green Printing Partnership. And through our printer charter, we've developed with SGP a streamlined process for printers who want to participate in both programs. So we want to make it really easy for our printers. The same EMS or SMS satisfies both requirements for SGP and Green Tier, as do the annual audits and the annual reports. And it's great to have the impact tracker available now so that dual certified printers can just provide their metrics seamlessly. Next slide, please, Joe. So both Wendy and Doreen touched on the overarching benefits of using an environmental management system or sustainability management system to gain efficiencies that yield cost savings, improved environmental performance, or meet supply chain requirements. But one of the main benefits of Green Tier that I wanted to mention is that it's a local program tailored to Wisconsin businesses. There's no fee to participate, so it can be a lower cost option. But of course, there is a cost associated with building, maintaining, and auditing an EMS, as well as annual reporting. But some more of the tangible benefits of Green Tier are a primary contact is assigned to each Green Tier participant, and that's an advocate for our businesses, and they help our participants navigate the agency, assist in problem solving, or just get our participants connected to the right person. We are all about celebrating our participants' successes, as I mentioned earlier, whether it's through video features, social media posts, or via participant web pages on our DNR website. we absolutely want to share our participants' accomplishments. We also offer the use of our Green Tier logo, which can help our participants gain a marketing edge. Our logo can be used on just about anything that you can imprint, and also it can be featured on products manufactured in Wisconsin. Wanted to touch on regulatory flexibility. Again, this is an option that's mainly available to our Tier 2 participants, but the benefits of regulatory flexibility and Tier 2 participation are growing all the time. So a lot of the options are the potential for streamlined permits. We just have a new flexible air registration operation permit called the ROP-G. We also work with our Tier 2 participants to develop modified monitoring requirements or alternative compliance methods. And I did want to mention too, Tier 2 participants have the ability to negotiate really any regulatory flexibilities that they would like to try. There is a contract between the department and Tier 2 participants. So there's a lot of potential there for innovation and creativity. So finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about deferred civil enforcement. The department is able to offer limited liability for some violations that a Green Tier participation finds incorrect. And, you know, that's part of the check process, right? Sometimes we know that our participants are doing great work, and sometimes compliance issues arise. So there is some limited liability available through the Green Tier law that we're able to offer. Next slide, please, Joe. Okay, really quickly, I wanted to talk about the environmental management system options in Green Tier. We have two options. Our participants can either certify their environmental management system using the ISO 14001 standard, or they can build their own. We call the build your own option a functionally equivalent EMS. And I think Wendy mentioned it's modeled on the ISO 14001 standard. So it aligns really well with the ISO standard. Green Tier law defines a functionally equivalent EMS with 15 criteria. And you can find those, I'm not going to go through the 15 criteria, they're on our website, but I will mention we have a lot of resources to help businesses who are just starting out and building their own EMSs. There are a lot of templates out there that we can connect businesses to. We have a lot of online resources, and our staff are always available to consult with our Green Tier participants. We also have a list of Green Tier approved auditors like Wendy, and those are a great group of folks to consult with as you're perhaps doing a gap analysis, as you're building your EMS, or if you want to, you know, get a little help in that process, because it's a high hurdle in the beginning for sure, but there are some really great resources out there. So I'm happy to answer any questions about Green Tier and at the Q&A, but at this point I will turn the program over to Dolores Corcoran from Lauterbach Group.
Hi everyone, this is Dolores. Can we advance the slide? All right, awesome. Thank you for allowing me to participate in sharing the Lauterbach's path that we've taken towards our environmental and sustainable initiatives. I think it's important when we talk about any kind of business management structure, we're really talking about transparency. And, you know, transparency comes in two ways. When you look at it from an environmental aspect, it's no impact, low impact. Transparency from a business management is about being able to know where you're at and know what your metrics are at any point during your daily activities. So, you know, we like to educate people that transparency is twofold. in that respect. So, you know, it's important to note, like, how did this journey begin? And the business was originally owned by the father. The three brothers own it now. The business was started in 1972, and the brothers took ownership of it in 1998, which I guess if you do the math, that's 21 years. So I think now they're all grown up, but hey, that's just a funny. So they started in New Berlin and decided that they wanted to relocate the facility. It was an older facility, and just the cost of doing business was with the old technologies in the building and um, building breakdown, those are quite substantial costs to a business, and so they wanted to look at a different alternative. And so they evaluated their business structure and their clients, their members, their suppliers, location, and made a decision to buy a parcel of land in Sussex, Wisconsin, where we're currently located. We took possession of this building in April of 2009. That makes the building 10 years old now. And but when we went to break ground in 2008, it was identified that that the survey was off, and there was 3 feet of topsoil that wasn't present. And when you're putting an 80,000 square foot building on top of that, now you're looking at water reclamation and displacement of water. And so we had to reevaluate the design of the building and how that looked, because it was a substantial cost to creating sewer systems and diverting that water. So we started looking at different alternatives. And so the building that you see right here is the end result of that. There was 3 different designs, and what we looked at is managing that runoff water. And so we started looking at alternatives, porous concrete, and how to divert waters. And ultimately, we found that there was a cost savings in the design of the building. And so we saved ourselves, porous concrete is like $6.50 a square foot, whereas regular asphalt is maybe up $1 per square foot. So it's a substantial difference in costing. But at the end of the day, by putting in a porous pavement, we actually saved $40,000 on all the diversion, the water diversion that would need to be implemented, and that the grounds would have to be changed. So ultimately, that's really where it started from. And that whole idea of being profitable and looking at environmental aspects, because I think one of the old things is that being environmental is expensive, and it's you know, being green is costly to companies, and really what we found is that it's not. And so what we did is we looked at some of those initiatives that were put out there from LEED, which is the U.S. Green Building, which is leadership in energy and environmental design. We knew that by building a building, we'd want to go with state-of-the-art HVA systems. We'd want to use newer technologies and all those things when you want to build a building. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we ended up with a LEED Silver certified building, but that wasn't the intent. Okay, that wasn't the intent. Was to build a state-of-the-art building that would be cost-effective in running its infrastructure. So that's really kind of what started our path down this whole idea, because what happens is when you have, you know, Shane probably wouldn't like me saying this, but when you have a retired accountant and he looks at the cost savings with building the building in an environmental friendly way, I think what you start is it starts to put light bulbs on that really environmental is a sustainable practice. So it kind of set that foundational principle. So I think what we've really, over the past 10 years, is we've really simplified what that looks like. And from a business management structure, what you really want to talk about is reducing your waste. When we talk about environmental, we say zero waste, meaning, you know, things to the landfill. But really, from a business management standpoint, zero waste is about reducing all motion defects, waiting time, neglecting people's intelligence, inventory, you know, reducing your inventory, reducing motion, extra processing. So it kind of all builds on itself when you're trying to build a company that can be profitable. So it's really a simple structure, what we have over here at the Lauterbach Group. It's all about getting better, improving our productivity, improving our education, and our ability, our transparency to what our results are, so that we can make clear decisions. Of course, it's always about profitability. I mean, well, when you're a sole proprietorship, you need to make a profit in order to stay alive in today's economy. But aligning with social, economical, and environmental concepts, because there's many out there that really drive that. And then while supporting our members, our suppliers, our clients, and our community, and the environment, we really talk about that as being your supply chain. So it really, that's kind of where we started off. So next slide, please. So that kind of really sets that foundation. So when you're looking at the way that your business management structure should look like, whether it be environmental, whether it be sustainable, whether it be a food safe system, some of us printers, you know, produce food safe products. So all those systems, when you're looking at that, when we look at environmental, sustainable, quality business management systems, you look at your employee systems, they all do carry that plan, do, check, act system. And they all kind of say that, you know, if you plan something, do it, you check it, and you can act on it if you have those structures in place. And I think when you want to integrate those and not just have an environmental system, or not just have a quality business management system or a food business management system, which are some of those architectures that we implement here in the group, and then your people aspect to your 4,501 systems that you have out there, they do all carry that commonality. And they all kind of talk about having policies in places and practices in places. And so, you know, when we look at it, our whole focus is really on our client base and what value we can add as a company. And so we take all these structures that our clients want from us, and we looked at that, and then we have to bring them together so they were, as we've talked about, so they're integrated within one system, and they're not standalone systems. So they have to work together or they fall apart. And they don't really, unless they're integrated into your daily activities, they're hard to keep going, the momentum, especially when you're a smaller size company, such as the Lauterbach Group. We're like 40 people here. And we're all probably wearing many hats. So when we look at it, you know, I like to, when we onboard people, we educate them, of course, in the 3 R's, you know, reduce, reuse, recycle. But I think it's important when you're looking at your environmental aspects in your business management structures, is you're really looking at things that are reviewable, retrievable, and readily available. But let's not forget that when you're looking at environmental and reducing waste, that you really need to rethink your structures. You really need to start refusing things, free gifts that are going to end up in your landfill, end up in your waste system, and then look at ideas of not just reusing things, but maybe refurbishing them and making them become something different. And we see that in waste to energy, creating heat pellets and things like that. So, you know, I like to educate people. I always just coin it as 3R cubed, you know, because that's really what you're looking at to reduce your waste, and educating people to be an intricate part of the way that you do business. So The leadership structure, we've coined it. It's the Lauterbach productivity system here. That's what we've coined, our business management structure, and it allows our leadership to review, modify, analyze our current policies, practices, and our key indicators. It also defines those improvement projects throughout, responsibility within the group. It controls the way that we do things through system documentation, forms, tracking systems in place. And then we monitor and measure and audit for structural integrity. And really, our key indicators, and keep it simple, is safety, quality, training, and environmental. So it is the 3 legs of sustainability. And I think, what we've learned over the years is that you have systems in place that are just built in by design. Then you have systems in place where you conserve and upkeep them, so ever changing. But then you also have that aspect of driving people to take ownership or stewardship over things, and then making sure that they have the education necessary and the training necessary to actually be able to take those actions forward. So it's really about creating a system, or for us, it was about creating and continually creating a system that empowers our members to feel free to make active change. So, we can talk about committees responsible, but really the committee, the members of the group, because we don't have, 15 people we can pull in a meeting and say, let's do this. We'll review things, but as far as like taking them away from their daily practices in order to spend time, it isn't as practical as really driving it from the way that we onboard people to focus that. So next slide, please. So from a foundational and operational perspective, like I said, build it by design, conserve it, upkeep it, and then stewardship and training. So the facility and the placement of it is, when you come visit us, you find that the front of the building is actually faced to the south, whereas the road is on the north side of the building. The entrance is on the north side of the building. And the reason that is because it allows us to utilize the sun in the corporate office and create light in the corporate office. So we have motion detection lighting that, depending on the amount of sun that's outside, it adjusts the lighting automatically. So it'll reduce it from 4 lights to 2 lights. We have easy access to highways and interstates. The landscaping, we have low to slow growing native vegetation, which requires that we don't do a lot of cutting of our grass. So we're not the VOC the VOCs that would normally be resulting from having to maintain your landscaping is completely reduced, substantially reduced from that level. Our water management system, I kind of talked about that. We have all our water is maintained on site. We have French drains that actually the water collects in those and then naturally dissipates. The porous concrete, which allows, it's a natural filtration system. We have low flow faucets and shower heads within our facility. We treat our wash-up waters, our production wash-up waters, and send gray waters back to the municipality. Everything, a state-of-the-art facility. It's kind of like a U-shaped. It comes in on one side and kind of flows through the building to ship in our production areas. We don't really have a warehouse per se for managing inventory. We really are just buy in time type of thing, which allows for the flow, first in, first out kind of ideas. We have our heating system is controlled through software and monitored through software. We recently, some of the projects were 10 years old, so things are starting to wear out in the company, and so we just changed a lot of the, not a lot, we changed all the lighting in our production warehouse, going from standard fluorescent lighting to more lighting that really works with the printing industry and really identifying colors, so it's a lot brighter for members, especially when you're doing quality checks and things like that, so that without having dedicated light boosts at every press. So that's but at some level we have the lights that are in the inspection tables. Security, we have security not just for our members, but also for our products. And waste management, which is all based on reducing the amount of spoilage at press side and managing those wastes. And then some of the things that we do as a company is we have people that work flexible work schedules. I work only 4 days a week. We have 2 members that actually telecommunicate out of those 40 members. One is out of state. We use laptops and handheld devices within the facility, reducing our amount of energy consumption. We reclaim rainwaters for the natural vegetation during drought season. We have preferred parking for members that carpool or that own hybrid vehicles. We also have, like, for people that pedal bike into work or bicycle into work, and then motorcycle parking as well. So we have wireless throughout the facility, and one of the actions last year was to take it from, we had virtual computing on our server side, but we've gone to cloud-based systems with, Office 365. And so everyone's storage space on the network is really now, their personal storage space on the network is now all cloud-based, but a lot of our business structures and our monitoring and things are starting to move up there. We anticipate that really our cloud-based system to be fully implemented by the end of this year, which is way cool. And then, stewardship and training, we educate people on, how we came to be, what our goals are, what our objectives are. We use 5S as a system approach to simplify what's available at press side or for anybody with really in the office as well. Giving things dedicated locations, making things readily available for people when they need them, whether that be colored paper, pens and pencils, staplers, whatever that may be. We try to centrally locate that so people can get what they need in order to be as efficient and as effective. Last year was one of the years that we really tried to implement our social sustainability aspect, other than, collecting monies for maybe some of the fundraisers, breast cancers, or I don't know, foodless, whatever those were that we had going on. We really implemented it where now we're doing more outreach. We're trying to, we volunteer at our local food pantry. We collect, well, in the past, last year, we collected school supplies, aligning with Uline's Fill the Bus campaign for the underprivileged children. We do food drives, we do clothing drives. Our local food pantry has a room that's dedicated towards clothing, slightly used clothing, and small household appliances. So we've done some gathering of those kinds of things, and we have a lot of participation in the group. We also do with education and training, we work really hard to educate our members for where we're going and what we're doing. We do 2 online trainings every month. One of them is driving safety concepts. And the other one is to drive and educate members on business management practices, whether that be environmental, from educating them on plastics and what that looks like in the environment, and batteries and recycling batteries. And then we've taken our own internal recycling systems and we've extended those, and we've worked with our recyclers so that instead of them having to, if they forget to take, let's say, their grocery bags back to the shopping market where they recycle them, they can bring them in and they can become part of our recycling stream in order to help implement and drive those practices if they don't have those, or if they just find it more necessary to drive that here. So they can bring in their light bulbs, they can bring in their batteries, and it will become a part of our waste stream in order to keep it out of landfill so that it can be recycled responsibly. So it really is, we do a lot of clean technologies, low to no VOC inks. We have no solvent-based systems. Our cleaning systems are all environmental, steaming, environmental friendly chemicals, is kind of the thing that we do. We work very, very diligently with our suppliers. I can tell you that, doing the analysis, 95% of all purchases were with our 16 key suppliers, and we had about 96 suppliers last year. So it's a substantial amount of business that goes straight to our key suppliers, and I think that helps us to be first to market. And of course, we're always looking to improve things. Next slide, please. And then, when you look at it, you look at the benefits and trying to educate people to take stewardship and to really drive things in responsibility for what they do. And that's really, instead of having a bunch of Indians, we'd rather have a bunch of chiefs, because they really are the experts. They're the ones that are doing it day to day. And we want to empower them to be able to make changes and help us grow as a company to make those small incremental changes, or even, have big suggestions to make, major changes based on their own experiences and their knowledge of their expertise. So from an organization, what we found is that you have business transparency. You know where you're at, and it can drive your decisions to make that. And I think right now we see a lot of systems or standards, especially international standards, they're all about risk ranking, making changes based on the ranking, not just low hanging fruit, but really what's going to cost you the most damage if you don't change it. And so educating people to recognize that the consequences for not taking action, we want to address those ones first. Those are the ones that really need to be addressed, is when, our clients or our safety is concerned, our product is concerned. We really want to be able to take focus on those actions, and because we are limited on our resources. And then, from an employee standpoint, there's a lot of benefits on both sides of it. I'm not going to go read through all these, but really it gives the group a focus. We're all focused. We're all looking in the same direction. It's like, I don't know, Shane likes to put it as big eye, little eye kind of thing, but we're all focusing in on what our goals and our objectives are. And we do that, through different ways. Every year we get together and have a planning committee, and various people are invited, and we really look at what our goals and our objectives are, and we release little business cards to everyone in order to help remind what our actions are, what our focus is on a daily basis, and what we're really looking for at the end of the year. So And I think, you know, each one of us, as the more that we educate our people in safety, the more that we educate them on business management structure, it really helps to increase their knowledge and their comfort level in order to feel confident to make changes, and that they're not just coming here for a paycheck. You know, we really want to embrace their knowledge within the company, because it's really all about reducing our waste. At the end of the day, it's all about reducing waste. And it's not just our environmental waste. It is our business management structural waste. And that kind of, whatever that feels like. So next slide, please. And so I've kind of put up some slides here for some of those actions that we have. I don't have enough room to put up the slides, but you know, you can see that, you know, our landfill waste has reduced. And, you know, when I look at waste to recycling over the, you know, the past 7 years or so, we've really reduced our overall waste substantially. Our, you know, especially our landfill waste, though we continue to see that it's really about, you know, 50% of our total waste continues to go to landfill. We haven't been able to get that over the limit yet. I imagine there's some substantial investments that will have to be made with that in order to really reduce and divert that from landfill. And that has to go to the budget for any kind of action. We did have a setback in 2016 where we had one of our rooftop units was failing, and what we had is electricity and gas running at the same time. And so they were fighting each other. So you had your heating and your air conditioning running at the same time, which really drove our numbers crazy in 2016. But as you can see, we were able to substantially adjust that once we replaced that rooftop unit in 2017. So I think, you know, we really work very hard to reduce our wastes at every level, and really know what our results are from customer satisfaction, our safety, our quality, and our environmental actions. So as long as we stay focused, we seem to continue to move forward in I think in an economy that appears we're growing strong, but I think a lot of businesses are still struggling to make profits. So that's probably all I got right now. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Well, this brings us to our question and answer. Again, Dolores, thank you so much for presenting. It's extremely helpful to understand some examples and samples of how you've been able, a lot of our groups been able to lead the way with their EMS system. I do have a question from the audience. This is for Wendy. Wendy, are you still with us?
I am.
Can you talk about strategies for setting doable objectives and targets? What approaches and data can help guide setting an achievable, realistic goal, both in the short and long term?
Well, I think you need to, if you're new to the management system game and the whole idea of setting objectives and targets, I think you need to start small in the knowable universe rather than setting some very elaborate goals. I mean, Dolores has given an excellent presentation, but I would suggest that their organization is very sophisticated and advanced in their knowledge, both of their business and of the opportunities and the solutions out there. So you need to really base it on what your knowledge base is at the point in time where you're developing an action plan. So look for simple kinds of to start with, which is why I suggested the solid waste, energy, water usage, because those are kind of the topics that people inherently understand, have a knowledge of, and have a good feel for, which is where you really need to start, I think. And once you've got some action plans under your belt, you start to get a better understanding of how they work and the types of things that you can address and the goals that you can achieve, and you really build capacity over time. So that's my kind of take. It's not an easy subject because it depends on, you know, what your starting point is, what your knowledge, how much participation you have from your team members, because that really is key for a lot of successful action plans and initial annual targets. So start with where you know and what your capabilities are, and get some early successes, because you're going to learn along the way.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Wendy. On the same subject, I have another question from the audience concerning goals. Dolores, are you still with us?
Yes.
How do you ensure your goals are on track? I'm guessing this is in the short and long term.
Yeah, I think we have key indicators. We have a scorecard, and we have weekly scorecard meetings that really all about our coming and presenting where we're at, and if we're not on track, it is about what actions are we going to take next. What is the next action in order to get on track, or do we need to really revisit what our goal is? And I think we see that throughout our operational management practices, is we do have key systems in place so that we can actually monitor where we're currently at. And again, it's about having those monitoring systems in place so you can really see where you're at.
Excellent. And then how do you actually capture that data? Is it in an Excel spreadsheet, or is it in a database? Is it a specially made system?
Yeah, it depends on what system it is. So some of them are Excel spreadsheets. Some are just in our manufacturing software itself, our day-to-day operational software. Some are just reports that are coming out of those systems. And then some, we have a few different spreadsheets that we use that help to record those, but they become more of the recording is done on the back end, whereas the infrastructure is just where they enter data. And so, and then in the background, it's doing the reporting and showing the historical values of that.
Excellent. Are there any other questions? Any questions? Well, perfect. We have an attendee survey that'll be sent out in the very near future. We're also going to include the recording in it, so please take the time to complete the survey. Your feedback and input will help us with the next webinar, which will be one on landfill. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you to mark your calendars for the next webinar, which is landfill free. That's going to be on August 20th, 2019. It's going to be at 9 a.m. Central, and we'd be pleased to have you participate in the next webinar. So with no further words, I appreciate all the presenters' time today in presenting environmental management systems, as well as those that participated today. Thank you so much, and again, we'll send out information to you in the near future with the recording as well as the survey, and then also information about how you can get involved with SGP as well as the Green Tier program with the Wisconsin DNR. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating today.